In this video, I'm going to go over how to do the front of our Unit 2A test review. We're going to start with order of operations. Remember that order of operations follows GEMMA: grouping, exponents, multiplicative operations, which is multiplication and division, and then additive operations, which is addition and subtraction. So I'm going to look first for grouping, and I see that I have parentheses around this, so this is what I have to do first. If I'm doing 12 minus 72, well, I'm taking away more than I have, so I already know that it's going to be a negative number. Now, and then I'm looking and I have a positive and a negative. Well, our little trick with our positive versus negative teams shows that I have 12 positives and 72 negatives. Since they're on different teams, that means that we have to subtract. 72 take away 12 is 60, and since there's more on the negative team, that means that negative is winning. So our answer is negative 60. I'm now going to bring down the rest of the problem, divided by negative 6. All right, these parentheses here are just to keep our division sign and our negative sign separate from each other, but it doesn't actually show any grouping because there's nothing to do inside of this. It's just a negative 6. There's nothing to simplify. So I'm done with G, grouping. I'm going to look E. There's no exponents on this problem, so I'm done with E. And so now I'm going to look for multiplicative operations. Is there any multiplication or division? Well, yes, there's division. And if we use our Illuminati, we know that a negative divided by a negative leaves us with a positive answer. So negative 60 divided by negative 6 gives us a positive 10. Let's look at problem 2. Problem 2. Again, I'm going to go through my GEMMA. I don't have any grouping, so I can cross that out right now. Next, I'm going to do exponents. I have 2 to the second power, which means that I'm multiplying 2 times itself 2 times. So that's 2 times 2, which is 4. I'm going to bring that down, and I'm going to bring down everything else around it. 3 times plus 4 minus 18. All right. So now I'm done with exponents. Now I'm going to look for any multiplicative operations, multiplication or division. I have multiplication, 3 times 4 is 12. That's the only multiplication I have, so I'm going to bring the rest down and cross out M. Now if I'm looking at my additive operations, I have both addition and subtraction, and you're going to do whichever one comes up first when you're reading it from left to right. So I have addition first, so that gives me 16. And I'm going to bring down the minus 18. Again, if we're thinking about our positive and negative teams, I have a positive 16. I have a negative 18. They're on separate teams, so we have to subtract. 18 minus 16 is 2. And since the negative's winning, it's a negative 2. All right, problem 3. This one's a little difficult because we really have to pay attention to our negatives. So again, we're going to be using our Illuminati, and we can also write out our GEMMA. All right, there is grouping on this one. I have 9 minus 20. Well, if I look at my positive and negative teams, I have 9 positive, 20 negative. So I have them on separate teams, so I'm going to have to subtract, and I get 20 minus 9 is 11. Since I have more on the negative side, that means it's a negative 11. Okay, and then I'm going to bring down everything else. Okay, I'm done with my grouping. There's no exponent, so I can cross that out right away. Now I'm going to do my multiplicative operations. Well, remember when a number is right next to a parentheses, that means we have to multiply. Okay, let's do 16 times 3. 16 times 3. 3 times 6 is 18. Take down the 8, put up the 1. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 more is 4. Okay, and since I have a negative times a negative times a positive, that means that it has to be a negative. So I have negative 48, and then I am subtracting a negative 11. Remember that when you're subtracting a negative, you're getting rid of negatives. What you're really doing is going positive, because this is like taking sand off your hot air balloon. So we can instead rewrite this as negative 48 plus 11. Now again, we can look at our positive negative teams, and I have 11 positives and 48 negatives. They're on opposite teams, so that means, again, means I need to subtract. And 48 minus 11 gives me 37. Since the negative number is larger, our negative team is winning. That means that it gives me a negative 37. Okay, problem D. All right, again, I'm going to go through Gemma. And I have to do what's in my groups first, so I can ignore this 1/3 right now. Then in my groups, I still have to follow my order of operations. So I can see in my group that I have exponents. So I'm going to do my exponents first. 4 to the second power means that I'm doing 4 times itself 2 times. So 4 times 4 is 16. Going to bring down everything else. 7 minus 16 times 1/3. All right, I still have to finish up what's in my group first. So I'm going to look at my group, and I have 7 minus 16. Again, if we look at our positive negative teams, I have 7 on the positive, 16 on the negative. Since they're on opposite teams, that means we have to subtract. 16 minus 7 is 9, and since negative is winning, it's a negative 9. So I have negative 9 in parentheses here, and I have 1/3 times negative 9. Okay, hopefully you remember that we learned with fractions that to change a number into a fraction so that we can multiply these, that you can put the 9 over 1. Otherwise, if you know and if you can think about it, what is 1/3 of 9? Really all we're doing is dividing by 3. But let me go ahead and turn negative 9 into a fraction. So we can turn this into negative 9 over 1. Okay, now if I'm doing my multiplication, that means I can go straight across. 1 times a negative 9 is a negative 9. 3 times 1 is 3. So now I have negative 9 being divided by 3. Again, using Illuminati, I already know that my answer has to be negative. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So our final answer for this one is negative 3. All right, let's look at our properties of arithmetic. So if I'm looking at my first problem, x plus z equals z plus x, I already know that this is an addition problem, so I already can ignore all my multiplication options. Then I'm going to look at it, and what's changing? Well, it flipped. It went from x to z to x. So that's our commutative property, where we can change the order, but the answer does not change. So this is going to be option 3, our commutative property of addition. Okay, let's look at B. 1 times 17 equals 17. Well, this is multiplication, so we already know we can ignore all our addition options. And this is our identity property because 17 doesn't change. It's still 17. 1 times anything does not change the number. So that's our identity property of multiplication. That is our option 2. Okay, C. Well, let's look. I have 2 outside of parentheses, and then I have 6x minus 3 inside my parentheses. And then over here, I have 2 times 6x minus 2 times 3. Well, I can already look at this problem, and it looks to me like it's a distributive property. 2 times 6x minus 2 times 3. All right, so that's our option 9. Okay, D. We have 3 times 5 times 8 equals 3 times 5 times 8. This is multiplication, so I already know I can ignore all my addition options. Notice that the order doesn't change. I have 3, 5, 8. I have 3, 5, 8. All that changes is how they are grouped together. Here it's the 3 and the 5 are grouped together. Here it's the 5 and the 8 are grouped together. When we change the groupings, we are using our associative property. So we're going to be using our associative property of multiplication, option 6. Finally, let's look at E. E, we have 8 plus a negative 8 equals 0. Well, if I have a positive and a negative, what I'm really talking about here is 0 pairs. We talked about the official name for this being our additive inverse, option 8. All right, final 2. We have to fill in the missing value to keep equivalence. So I have to have something plus a negative 6 equals negative 6 plus something. Well, look, I have a negative 6 on both sides. This is really just the commutative property, that I am switching the order, but nothing else changes. So if I ignore the negative 6 on both sides, That means that this fraction has to be equal to 1.5 or 1.5. The only fraction, or the easiest fraction, the most simplified fraction that we can use for that is 3 halves, because 1.5, turn it into an improper fraction, because 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 more is 3 halves. All right, G, fill in the missing value to keep equivalence. Well, let's look at this. This is actually going to be a distributive property. 4 times A is 4A, plus 4, which is the same thing as 4 over 1, times negative 6 over 4. Okay, well, let's look at this. We can cross cancel. I have 4 and I have 4. And so our answer is negative 6 over 1, which is the same thing as negative 6. So this answer right here is a negative 6. All right.